Let's see him. How many of you have your Bibles with you this evening? Almost everybody. That's what we want to see. Okay. Hopefully, as you came in, our kids got some, we have our Olympians with us again tonight, got some papers to follow along. Again, there's some ways for our older ones that you can tally your points as you listen. And so take those to Tracy when you're done, and you can show her what you've got, and she might have some treats for you after the service. So make sure you follow along and show them what you got there. Let's do this. We're going to go ahead and, if you have your Bibles, turn to Psalm 139. Psalm 139. We actually were here last Wednesday. We looked at the first half. Tonight we're going to look at the second half as we continue our summer Psalms. And I like to review. All of you know that. But I thought, and just keep in mind as I'm teaching, if I ask a question, then I want to ask, primarily I want to ask my Olympians first, okay? So I had adults in here who wanted to show off last week and show how smart they were. And so so when I ask a question, I'm going to ask Olympians first, and then I might move to the adults depending on my responses from the kids. Or I may direct a question directly to the adults. So you just pay attention and listen and kind of follow along. But as we looked at Psalm 139, somebody remind me, all right, again, we're asking the kids here first, what kind of writing is this that we're looking at? What kind of I don't want to say literature, but does anybody remember the Psalms? Do you remember what they are? The Psalms, Emma? Songs. All right, Emma wasn't here last week, so I'm not sure how she knows that. But the Psalms are songs. All right, so keep that in mind as we look at this. This was something that was meant to be sung. Right? It was meant to be sung. And so we saw in the first half of this psalm, we saw two big truths about God. Right? Psalm 139 is all about who God is. And so anybody remember what our two great big points about God was? From last week, who was here? All right, I'm going to give the kids a second, and then I'm going to move on. All right, we said God is... what? Always present, right? We said God is everywhere, right? Anybody remember what the big term for that was? God is everywhere? Omnipresent, all right? So then we also said God, remember what the first one was? Omniscient, all right? Omniscient means God, what? He's all-knowing. God knows everything. Right? So those are the big truths that we looked at about God last week. All right? So if you missed out, we said that God knows everything. And God is everywhere. Now those are important big truths about who God is. And here's the thing. We want to know that God is big like that he knows everything, that he is everywhere. But sometimes when we think about God in such big ways, it can make him seem like he's far off. Right? That there's a God out there who knows everything, and he's everywhere, but what does that mean to me? So we saw David not rest on that big truth that God knows everything, but we said that David understood that God knows everything about me. Right? That's important, right? So there is a big God who knows everything, but he knows you. He knows you. And there is a big God who is everywhere, but he is everywhere you are. Right? And so that's important. And that's David's trying to move this big God in close because God desires to be in a relationship with us. Right? He's not some distant God who just created things and then left it be. God is very close with his creation. So David here is saying that we can know God the way that we know our family and our friends. That's hard, isn't it? Because we don't see God. We don't feel God. We can't touch him. And yet, David says we can know him in a close way. The way that we know family, the way we know friends. And so, let me ask a big question. All right, this is Olympians first. And let me see if I can get an answer. All right, if I just said, what is God? How might you answer that? What is God? Emma? Love. All right? Now we got a verse to back that up, so I can't argue with her, right? God is love, according to 1 John. Holy. All right, there we go again. All right, so we're getting some good truth here that we're going to, right? In fact, holy is the way that God is described 3 times, right? Holy, holy, holy is the Lord, right? And so God is set apart from his creation. Anything else? All right. You want another one? Perfect. All right, yeah. The end of Matthew 5 says, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. I mean, you had one more? Perfect. All right. So if I was just asking, and this is something I've done with my children, my older girls anyway, is we've kind of worked through what we call a catechism, right? And so the question is, what is God? And the answer would be, God is the creator of everyone and everything. Right? So that would be the answer. If we ask the question, what is God? Right, that's important, that we know the answer to that question, right? We said last week, the most important thing about us is what we think about God. So we see big truths here, and we're gonna kind of move into that. Again, we want to see the big overall picture, but then we want to bring it really close so we can grasp it where we're at. So let's look at Psalm 139. I'm going to read verses 13 to 15 to start with. You follow along. We're following up on those 2 big ideas. God knows everything. God is everywhere. But then in verse 13 it says, for you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Right, now, there's a couple things we want to pull out here from those verses. Right, the first thing we see in verse 13, it says, you formed my inward parts. And then in verse 15, it says, I was made in secret. Right, so we understand that God made you. God made you. Right? So now, what did God make? He made you. And what else did God make? He made everything. Now, what does that say about God? If God made everything, he's what? All right, Patty says, if God made everything and he made me, then he is all powerful. All right. Now, let me ask you a question. What did God make everything out of? Nothing? Yeah, my girls were making some handbags this week, and I'm thankful Melissa kind of guided them through that process. And so, but, you know, before they made those bags, they had to go buy material. They had to go buy fabric. They had to get supplies. You know, to make something, they had to have materials to make it out of. But God, when he made everything out of nothing. So when we stop and we say God is all-powerful, that's an understatement. That's an understatement. There's no grasping the fullness of his power. So there's our other big theological word. If God is omniscient, he knows all things, he's omnipresent, he is everywhere, then if God is all-powerful, then he is omnipotent. Omnipotent, right? Meaning God has all power. Listen to that tonight, because that's important for every single one of us, whether you're 5 or whether you're 85. There is nothing that God cannot do. God is able. God is able. He has all power. You know, you remember when the angel showed up to Mary in Luke chapter 1, and he told Mary she's going to have a baby. And Mary's like, how can that be? You know, and the angel looked at Mary and said, with God, all things are possible. All things are possible. There is nothing that God cannot do inside of his character, and that's important. I remember, he's not in here, so Josh Allen's back working with the teenagers. He would always come up and he'd say, can God heat a burrito hotter than he can eat it? and I thought, what a silly question, Josh. Yeah. But there's things that God cannot do, right? God cannot lie because it's not within his character. It's not within his nature. God is truth, and so he will always tell the truth. So, are there some things that God cannot do? Yes, but only those things that lie within or that are outside of his character. We have a God here who is all-powerful, who does his will to accomplish his purpose. But notice, it's not just that God is all-powerful and made all things, but he made you. He formed your inward parts. You were made in secret. That's important. You did not just happen. You were not an accident, right? Here we see a picture that God formed. God made. He created. You and I are unique. We're unique. In all of creation, you understand that? Okay, let me ask the kids. All right. What has more value? Your little baby brother or sister or a little puppy? Which one's more valuable? The brother or sister, right? Good answer, right? We got adults out there who don't understand that, right? They don't get it. There's something different between humans and animals, right? God made us special. When he was making the animals and he made the universe and he made the trees and everything we see, God looked and said, it is good. But when he made men, he looked and said, it is very good. When he made all of those things, he spoke and it came to be. But when it came time to make man, he pulled the dirt up from the dust of the earth and he formed it with his hands. And he breathed into it the breath of life. There's something unique about humankind, right? And so we have a powerful picture here of the value of what it means to be made in God's image. So God made you, and listen to this, God made you special. Now, this sounds like a VeggieTale outline, right? God, you made you special, and he loves you very much. But what we see here, when we look at these verses, look at verse 13 says, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. Verse 15, we were intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Now, this is amazing to me that David even grasps this or understands this. David's thinking about what it was like when he was still in his mom's tummy, right? That's what he's thinking about. And he's saying, when I was still in my mom's tummy, God wove me, knit me together. God formed me. God made me. Now, he didn't have what we have, right? He didn't have a 4D ultrasound or a sonogram where he could look in and see. He just had such an understanding of who God was that he knew that God was closely tied to his being, that God made him. He uses these words like knitting and woven to describe the way in which God made us. Now, that's not me. I don't knit and I don't weave. But I do know this. There's great detail in that. And there's great care that goes in that. And there's great variety that goes into that. When you look at embroidery or when you look at something that's been knitted, there's a variety of colors and there's a great attention to detail that's required. And so when David uses these words to describe how God made us, he's saying that God made us special. It's not like you came off an assembly line, right? We're not carbon copies, right? We were made uniquely, specially by God. That means from your head to your toes, you are what God made you to be. Now, this is before you were ever born, before your mom or dad ever thought about you. God had already designed you. That's incredible when you stop and you think your size, your shape, every feature, your hair, your eye color, all of it was planned and designed by God. God made you just the way you are. You ever complain about that? I don't like this about me. I don't like this about me. God made you that way. And not just your physical features. God, you ever said this? I'm just not wired that way. I mean, when I see this picture of being knit together, I think that's what I see is the veins and the everything tied together. We have different desires, different likes, different dislikes. When you start thinking about the way that you're wired, different passions and hopes, different abilities. You ever notice how some things come really easy for other people and they're really hard for you? Or the other way around. Some things come really easy to you and they're hard for other people. Why is that? Because God wired you like that, right? He made you that way. There are certain things that God made you to do. And so we see that God made us unique and special. Scientists are they're researching, they're discovering the human body, and they continually find things that absolutely blow them away. All right, here's a question for the kids. See if you can answer this. All right, you guys listening? All right. In what single place can you find the following things? All right, listen closely. 19 million cells, 625 sweat glands, 65 hairs, 19 feet of blood vessels, and 19,000 sensory cells. Now, that was a big, long list. Emma's already got her hand up. Anybody else? I've called on Emma several times already. All right, Emma. A human? All right, now you're on the right track, but you're thinking way too big. Anybody at all? Your ears? All right, that's a good guess. All right, okay, now then you heard what I said, right? 19 million cells, 625 sweat glands. This is mind-blowing. 19 feet of blood vessels is in 1 square inch of skin. You catch that? 1 square inch of human skin has 19 feet of blood vessels. All right, so that is incredible, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. In fact, the human skin is the largest considered organ on the body, and your skin will cover 20 square feet. You just kind of take the skin off somebody, and you can cover not just to the basketball hoop, but twice to the basketball hoop. Right? Absolutely amazing, right? So we have this incredible picture here. Let me do one more just to give you a picture of how incredible this creation is. Right? Now, I know especially for some of our younger ones, this is going to be a little bit over the top. Right? But a single human chromosome, right? A chromosome is what makes up our DNA molecules. Right? So a single human chromosome contains 20 billion bits of information. Now, I don't know what a bit is. You probably don't either. There's 20 billion bits of information in a single human chromosome. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, let's try and equate it to something we can relate to and we can maybe see physically. All right, so 20 billion bits are equal to 3 billion letters. All right, now you're still like, I can't figure 3 billion, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 3 billion times. All right, so the information that's contained in one human chromosome corresponds to about 500 million words. 2 million pages, or, to put it in perspective where you can see it, 4,500 page books. All right? And that's in one single DNA molecule or chromosome. All right? Now, there are several chromosomes that make up a DNA molecule. So if you took one DNA molecule and you took the information that was contained in that, you have more information than in the entire Library of Congress, right? Just in one DNA chromosome. Right? It's mind-blowing, isn't it? How can anyone look at humans, and say that just happened? That was an accident. You can't. Yeah, this is God intricately, intimately made us in his image. Absolutely incredible here. And then look at verse 16. He says, Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them. The days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. So not only did God make you, and not only did he make you special, but God made you with a purpose. The language here is stunning. Before, right, you saw me, you saw my unformed substance. That's my boy. You saw my unformed substance, right? Before you were ever born, you catch that? Before you were ever born, God knew you. Right? And the picture here is that he knew you in such a way that he had outlined your days in his book. God had a plan and a purpose for you, for your life. Let me quote a verse to you from Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations." All right, so before Jeremiah was ever born, God says, I knew you. But not only did I know you, but I also had a plan for you. Before he was ever born, God planned for Jeremiah to be a prophet. So God had a plan for Jeremiah's life. And God has a plan for your life. He has a plan for your life. There's no life that is without meaning and without purpose. Every single life has purpose and meaning. And God has it planned. This is absolutely incredible, right? Before there were any days in your life, God had already written them out in his book. What does that say about God? Right? Again, we see it. We have an all-powerful God, but we have a God who's in complete control. He is sovereign over his creation, not just in terms of length of life, but in the very specifics of life. God's plans and purposes are written before you were ever born. That's incredible to think. You know, this is helpful for us. Sometimes we stop and we see sometimes tragic circumstances where somebody's taken from us before we think they should be, and that's hard for us. It's hard for us, right? It's not easy for us. But from God's perspective, there was never a surprise. I think that's important. When we read verse 16 and he says, "Every one of my days was written in your book before there was one of them." God had every single day planned out. That Hebrews 9:27 says it's appointed unto man once to die, and after this to judgment. That there's an appointed time. This to me is a great encouragement to my heart, because I can go and I can seek to live for God to the best of my ability, and then God's going to accomplish his plans and purposes with however long he's given me. And so there's this overarching sense of comfort, security, and knowing that God has everything worked out according to his plans and purposes. And according to Romans chapter 8, those plans are for my good and for his glory. That's good news. So we have these big truths here, and they come very close to home, right? It's not just that God made all things, but he made me. He made me special. He knows me. He has plans for my life. And those are things we should seek after. Every single one of us should seek to fulfill the plans that God has for us. David, whenever he came to the end of his life, he was going, "God, I pray that I'm remembered as someone who fulfilled your plans, your purposes." That's what we see. Actually, we see that in Acts chapter 16. But how does David here respond to this? How does he respond to the all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful God? Well, did you see it in verse 14? "I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well." Down in verse 17, "How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them? If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I am awake and I am still with you. He just says, wonderful. How precious to me are your thoughts. Here we see a picture of David as he contemplates who God is to where he's simply overwhelmed. He stands in awe of God. And we've talked about that, right? Whether you're sitting along the seashore and you're looking out over the ocean, or you're standing next to the Grand Canyon, or looking up into the night sky, there's a sense of just wonder. And this is where David's at when he thinks about who God is. God, you are more awesome than I can fathom. More incredible than I can imagine. He just says, it's too much for me. It's more than the sand. Yeah, I can't count the many different thoughts of you. Now, let me ask just some application questions here. What are these truths, these big truths about God? And what we've looked at so far, what does that say about life? What does that say about life? Okay, Patty says we shouldn't worry. How true is that? Why worry if we have a God who already knows and is already there and is able to take care of whatever it is that we're worried about? So we shouldn't worry if we have a God who's all-knowing, all-powerful, and always there. Anything else? What does that say about life? It's precious. All life is precious. Don't miss that truth. Right? That means that no matter the size of life, no matter the stage of life, and no matter the gender or the race, right? All life is precious. That's something that there are many places in the world that don't get that. They don't understand how precious life is. But if we come at life from this standpoint, that God made us in his image, then every single life is precious. Now, we can take some farther steps, but I'll let you go. I'll let you run with that for a bit. Anything else? Okay. Now this is, if you didn't catch it, she said we should live our lives for his glory. Now that's significant. If God made me and he has plans and purposes for me, I told you my girls made some handbags, right? They got the material, they made them. Well, you know what? That belongs to them. And they can do with it what they desire to do with it. Well, if God made me, I belong to him. And my desire should be to fulfill his purpose, his plans. So this is a big idea, but you exist first and foremost for God, for his glory. And so you should seek to fulfill that each and every day of your life. All right, let me ask another question. I got to move quick. All right, so what does this say about evolution? All right, Patty says there's no such thing. And we don't have time to walk through all this together. But you know what? There are Christians who believe in what we would call theistic evolution, who would say that God created all things, and then now he continues that through the process of evolution. We don't believe that because we don't believe the Bible teaches that. God made. God created. He's involved intimately in his creation. To think that this just happened, that we evolved from a lower life form, that's a far stretch, isn't it? What is what we've seen say about something like abortion? It's murder, right? There's no other conclusion, right? If God knew you before you were born, before you were placed into your mother's womb, if God had plans and purposes for you before then, what other conclusion is there? that you are a person created by God, for God, and therefore to take that life is nothing short of murder. Right? And we don't have time to trace out all the arguments tonight, but this one passage we've looked at has much to say about life in the world we live in. And David responds and simply says, I'm just in awe. I'm amazed at this God. I stand in awe of who he is. And then we'll just finish this out. We'll see two other responses that David has in light of this God. Okay? Beginning in verse 19, "Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies." Now, that's not a passage I would have probably normally picked for our time with the Olympians in here, because it seems like it's not quite right, doesn't it? When you read those verses, it just anytime somebody says the word hate, Jason goes, "That's not a good word. You don't say that," right? Yeah. Do I not hate those who hate you with a perfect hatred? How do you talk about? Here's what's happening with the psalmist, right? As he comes to understand who God is, there dwells within us a desire that we hate sin the way God hates sins. That's what's happening here. Right? This is what's called an imprecatory prayer, if you want to know. You can kind of look that up and study that on your own, because we're not going to. Imprecatory, all right? Imprecatory, right? And it's the idea of just calling down punishment. You remember, the disciples, shall we call fire down from heaven, Lord? Right? No, right? And so here what we see is a reflection of the heart of God, right, towards sin. And you say, well, I didn't think I was supposed to hate any, right? We're supposed to love our enemies. We're supposed to pray for those who despitefully use us. And all of that is true. There's no distinct, we want to, but what happens when we see people who are absolutely opposed to God is there should be a righteous anger that boils up within us that reflects the heart of God. That's what's happening here. Now, at the same time, as David prays this, he also understands that he's not what he should be. So notice he says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." You see how personal he gets here? He's looking out. I hate the condition of sin I see all around me, but Lord, search me. Now this is the same word he used back in verse 1 when he said, "Lord, you have searched me." So he's saying, he's not asking God necessarily to know him. God knows him. He's saying, "Lord, help me to know my heart. Search me, O God. Know my heart." What's he saying? David understands that his heart is deceitful and wicked. Right? We can fool ourselves. And so here he's just saying, "Lord, search me, test me, try me." That's what test me. See if there's anything in me that should not be there. Anything that would grieve your heart. That's what he says in verse 24, right? Anything that would make you sad, that would break your heart, show me, Lord. Lead me in the way that's pleasing to you. That's the right heart, right? If God made me, then my desire should be to please him. And so this is David's prayer as he says, "Lord, I'm absolutely in awe of who you are, and I want to please you. So search me. Search me. See if there's a desire for holy living in light of this God." As I've looked at Psalm 139 over the last couple weeks, I stand in awe. The God who he knows everything. He is everywhere. He has all power. But a God who wants to know me. He wants to know me personally. And so as we conclude tonight, the question for each of us is, do I know this God? Do I know this God? Am I in relationship with this God? Because that's what he wants. He's revealed himself to us in such a way and designed us to know him. And so I pray you do. And if you do, live in light of these truths. Why worry? Don't have to worry. Is life precious? Yes, life is precious. Should I live for him? every single day, every moment with all that I have. Let's close in prayer.